So, my topic today is making peace. And I want to begin with a fable. And it's a fable about a king who decides to challenge the artists in his community to see what artist can depict a painting that most describes peace. And he gets a lot of artists respond, and he has a committee that judges, and they come down to the final two paintings, and it's up to him to decide. So I want to describe them to you. So the first painting has a very peaceful lake, and there are beautiful mountains that surround the lake, and the sky is blue with fluffy white clouds, and everybody that looks at it says, that is a perfect depiction of peace. The second painting has mountains too, but they're bare and they're rugged. And the sky is angry. It's lightning and it's raining out, and there's a rugged waterfall going down from the mountain. And there's a tiny crack in one of the stones of the mountain. And in that tiny crack, a bird, a mama bird, has made her nest. And despite all of the lightning and all of the rain and all of the noise, she sits there quietly on top of her eggs. And that's the painting that the king chose. And the reason he gave is because peace is an inside job. We can have peace no matter what our external conditions are. Peace is a choice that we make. It's experiencing the presence of God. And when we dissolve all thoughts of separation, then we see the presence of peace within us. And peace is not the absence of pain and conflict. It's the ability to deal with adversity in the midst of suffering. And in one of my books that I wrote, in the book Experiencing the Beacon Within, I relate a story that Thich Nhat Hanh used to tell. And it's about the time in the Vietnam War when they had boats that were trying to leave Vietnam and find a more peaceful place. And these boats were stacked with people. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, as they went along the ocean, if a storm came or pirates came and people panicked, the boats capsized, they sank, and everybody died. He said, however, if one person remained calm and one person remained centered, everybody was saved. One person in the presence of God was enough to save everybody on those boats. You know, situations don't cause us stress. It's our thinking that causes us stress. And if you need proof, you could just see two people can have the same situation and have very different experiences through it. And so years ago, I read a story about that, and it stuck with me because one of the people in the story is Japanese descent, and so is my wife. So that story stuck. And it's a story about two young college students that shared a dorm room. One was of Italian descent, and the other was what I said, it was third generation Japanese. And one day, the Italian kid was gone for a while. When he came back, he said to his roommate, I was gone because one of my grandparents died. And he said, you should have seen that funeral. I've never seen chaos like that. People were screaming, pulling out their hair. He said it was something that was just unbelievable. And about a month or two later, he comes back to his room. All the lights are out. All the furniture is pulled to the side of the room. There's a ring of candles that's lit, and in the center of the ring sits this young Japanese boy meditating. When he gets done, his roommate says, "What were you doing?" And he said, "One of my grandparents died the other day, and this is how I was honoring them." Same exact situation, two different responses. It isn't that one's right and one's wrong, it's just difference. It's our way of thinking. When we are feeling stress, we can change that at any time if we start to think of peace. You know, isn't it, I don't know if you find this, I find it amazing that when we read a news article or even know somebody that's lost a lot, like maybe their house burns down. Becky and I knew somebody that happened to a few months ago, lost everything. And maybe it's an illness or the breakup of a relationship, and yet they're still able to maintain peace and acceptance. You know, we don't have to wait until a tragedy strikes for us to be able to do that. We can decide anytime we want to live from the inside out. And there's a story about a farmer who puts an ad in the newspaper that he wants a farmhand. And a young man applies for the job. And in the interview, the farmer says to him, "How are you qualified to work on a farm?" And the young fella says, "I can sleep when the wind blows." The farmer has no idea what that means, but since nobody else applied for the job, he hires him. A few nights later, in the middle of the night, there's a huge storm, and it awakens the farmer and his wife. And they go out and they check on things, and they look, and the shutters are all closed tightly. There's enough firewood for a few days. All of the tools are locked up in the shed. The tractor is locked up in the garage. The barn is closed, and all of the animals are calm. And through it all, the young man slept. And then the farmer got what he meant. He was prepared, he got prepared when the skies were blue so he could sleep when the storm came. When you and I do our spiritual work, we can also find peace when life takes an unpleasant turn. It's a little late to do it when life takes that unpleasant turn and you haven't prepared yourself. It's a little late to say, what was that book I was going to read? Or what was the class I was going to take? You know, it's when you're going through a dark night of the soul, you need to be better prepared. Wayne Muller is a wonderful spiritual speaker and writer, and he's written a number of great books, one of which was called Sabbath. In Hebrew, Sabbath means rest. And you know, we live in a world where we're inundated with information, and some of us were talking before, you turn on the news, there's plenty to stress you out watching the news about wars, about political strife. And Wayne Muller's point was that we need to take time to be renewed and refreshed. And there are so many ways we could do it. We can light candles. We can tell tales. We can play music. We can go out to dinner with good friends. We can make love. We can walk in nature. We can meditate. Or we can just be still. All different ways. We can choose our own. I'll just tell you what one of mine. I meditate every day. But Becky and I live in Port St. John, and we live probably 200 feet from the Indian River. And when the weather is nice, I like to work out in our screened-in porch, because when I want to take a break, I can just look up and I could see this beautiful water, and if I'm lucky, I could see dolphins breach or a manatee or sailboats calmly sailing along, and it takes me to a place of peace that's really, really difficult to express. And I actually wasn't going to do this one, but I just have to tell you, because it happened to me yesterday, and it really surprised me, but it was a good lesson about peace. So when I do a message, after I prepare it, I really go over it a whole bunch of times. So even though I have notes, I don't have to read them. I could just look down quickly and know what I want to do. So I had been going over this message quite a few times. And I said to Becky, so she wouldn't come in and interrupt me, I'm going to meditate now. Because whenever I meditate, she has to come in and make noise. It's just part of our relationship, you know. And I started to meditate, and I realized from going over the talk so many times, I was in such a place of peace. By reading about peace, I almost didn't need to meditate. It took me to a place that was so peaceful already. I was so calm and into it. And it just spoke to me how when we concentrate on peace and we put our thoughts on peace, we are at peace. You know, I'll tell you another fable about a wise old lady who's walking in the mountains, and she gets thirsty, so she stops by a stream to take a drink. And she sees a stone in the stream that she realizes is really, really valuable. So she picks it up and throws it in her bag. And a couple of hours later, she runs into a young man and who's tired and hungry, and he asks her if she has any food, and she says, sure. And she opens up her bag, gives him some food, and he sees the stone. And he realizes right away, if I had that stone, my life would be made. I'd be made for life. So he asks her, he said, can I have the stone? And she says, yes. And she hands it to him. And about 2 days later, she sees him again, and he interrupts her this time, and he gives her back the stone. And he says, here, I want the real gift. And she says, what's that? And he says, I want whatever it is that's inside you that allowed you to give me that stone so easily. Because when I have that, then I know my life will be made and I'll be able to live in peace. I'm sure most of you know Eric Butterworth, who's the late Eric Butterworth, a great unity minister. And he wrote that when we get still enough, we can experience God saying to us, you are my beloved child. You are loved. You are whole. You are free. The activity of God is always working in our life to bless us and to heal us and to fill us with good. And when we get ourselves out of the way, the divine flow does its perfect work within us. And the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart said in the 1200s, let God be God in you. And so Cherie Carter Scott is a modern day writer, and she talks about what they're talking about, but a little different language. She talks about surrender. And she says, you know, when we surrender, we go with the flow of life rather than struggling against it. And she said, the key to coming to peace is surrendering to what is, not trying to create what we think it should be. And she said, surrender isn't passive. It simply means surrendering to what you have no control over. And she gives a really great example in her own life, and one I'll bet a lot of us have experienced. She was sitting typing her manuscript, and she had 12 pages done, and she hit a key, and all of a sudden she had a blank page. All 12 pages of the manuscript were gone. And she said, so I had a choice. I could get upset or I could surrender. And she said, either way, the facts remained the same. And so what she did, took a deep breath, took a walk, and started all over again. So I want to come to a close and share with you one of my wife's favorite spiritual writers, Joel Goldsmith. And in one of his writings, he starts out with a quote I'm sure we've all heard of. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, I give unto you. And Goldsmith says, this is the peace that we must carry with us even when there's turmoil. That God's peace is through everything, every kind of storm, and through every kind of discord. It's the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that comes from this realization, which I'll close with. I will never leave you or forsake you. If you walk through the water, I will be with you. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people. I will never leave you or forsake you. Wheresoever you go, I will go. Yea, though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will walk with you. I will be with you. I will be in you, and I will be through you. Fear not, I am with you. God bless you, and have a peaceful week.